That was so beautiful. Thank you. So how do you say farewell in Angolan? How do you say farewell in Angolan? Okay. You know, that sounded like a very hard song. Was that a hard one to learn? No? Okay, because you were going all over the place there. It was together. It was great. Great. Wonderful to see all of you here, and to hear the junior choir and your beautiful voices, which add so much to our worship service here. You know, when you go back to your Sunday school classes, you know what we're going to be doing in here? We're going to be talking about an emotion called anger. Does anybody here ever feel angry? You do? You do? Well, I know the big people feel angry, but you look at what? My gosh. All right. What makes you feel angry? Yeah. And the brother messes up Legos. Yeah, what else? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Boy, this is dump on your brother Sunday. Okay. Anything else other than, not related to, do you have a brother? Do you have a brother? You're going to talk, does he make you angry? One more, yes, what makes you angry? Okay. All right, so I'm glad we keep the anger within the family. That's really good. But let me ask you this. After you're angry, how do you show that you're angry, by the way? Do you, what do you do? I don't know, okay, yeah. What do you do when you're angry? It's so bad you don't want to talk about it. Okay. Is there steam coming out of your ears? Is that a hint? No, okay. Yeah, what do you do when you're angry? Close the door and then you scream? You scream into your pillow. Okay, good. So let me ask you this. You know, you show some anger at members of your family and maybe some friends. How do you feel after you express your anger? Okay, so let's say your brother or sister they're mean and then you let it out, and then what happens? How do you feel after you're angry? Yeah. You feel embarrassed and bad. Yeah. How do you feel after you get angry? Let me take one more. Yeah, how do you feel after you're angry?
I feel upset.
You feel upset?
Yeah.
With yourself? Yeah. It's like kind of, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Yeah. All right. Well, these are very sophisticated responses. We get angry even at people we love in our own family, and then after we erupt with our anger, we can feel upset and we can feel embarrassed. We're going to take that all into account when we talk about anger here a little further along in the morning. But right now we're going to continue with our ritual of lighting the chalice. And I'd like to ask the family, we got Papa Travis and Mama Star and their two daughters, Adele and Nora. Not noisy Nora, no, just regular Nora. When you come up and light the chalice, please.
Symbol of light, symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth, symbol of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So I want you to realize that after you're angry, or instead of becoming angry, I want you to remember this hymn and sing this hymn instead of being angry, okay? It's hymn number 100, I Got Peace Like a River. We'll do 4 verses.
As I thought about anger this week, preparing for this morning, I thought about how most of us approach anger as something to control or manage. Isn't that what we hear a lot? And certainly, anger, like any emotion, can become unhealthy if we don't understand it or keep it in perspective. However, anger at its best is purposeful and necessary. If it weren't, why would we have evolved to feel it? Anger in a mature person serves to protect our own sense of dignity and that of our human siblings. Anger appears when we or someone else close to us is subject to injustice. It gives us the strength and courage necessary to confront that injustice and set the world to right. So I invite you now to settle into a few moments of quiet Maybe take a deep breath if it feels good to you. And locate your anger. Don't get yourself all worked up. Just think about where your anger hangs out when you're feeling it or when you're not feeling it. Is your anger in your stomach? In your head? In your hands or feet? Or in your back? When you feel angry, can you locate that feeling and breathe into it and understand it? Is your anger hiding somewhere like a frightened child? Is it boxed up or locked up behind a heavy door? Or is it simmering just under the surface, waiting to bubble over? Wherever your anger is hanging out, in a quiet and peaceful moment such as this one, we can say thank you to our anger. We can say, thank you for protecting me. Thank you for letting me know when something is wrong. We can ask our anger not to harm us, but to help us do good work in the world. There's so much to be angry about these days. Our anger has a lot of work to do. And stuffing it down helps no one, least of all ourselves. Knowing where our anger is and taking care of it as we take care of our other emotions can help keep us from becoming overwhelmed by it. May it be so as we go through this hour and through this week.
Does anybody here listen to Fox News? We're among friends. How about MSNBC? Yeah, well, I used to be in love with Rachel Maddow. I thought she was just terrific, and I thought it was almost a miracle how she could just dial into who I was, what I was feeling. And then, it got to the point where I just started backing off a little bit. I can't take this, I can't take it. She's right on, but I can't take it. And this article helped me identify that she too, because they're, all cable networks, are merchants of anger. And I think that's a very fitting image. Merchants of anger. So one former Fox producer I spoke with said that his network realized early on that if watching anger was entertaining, then getting a chance to participate in it, hearing your indignations given voice by a bombastic host, was irresistible. This was the model of one of Fox's early hits, The O'Reilly Report, in which host Bill O'Reilly spent each episode airing his grievances against elitist academics who questioned America's fealty to its ideals, against the liberal media establishment, and a little later on against people who said Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. Executives from other cable news channels publicly disdained his approach and rushed to imitate it. In a 2009 Tufts University study of opinion media, so that's kind of a genre in and of itself. So they got the study of opinion media, and this Tufts University study found that 100% of TV episodes and 98.8% of talk radio programs contained outrage. On MSNBC, commentators such as Chris Matthews, Keith Olbermann, and Rachel Maddow found ratings success by playing on their viewers' discontent, even if they stopped short of borrowing O'Reilly's most demagogic tactics. The method at both networks was and is to tap into our reservoirs of moral indignation. But the point isn't to start a social movement or really even to affect political change, though the programming for Fox News and MSNBC does have political consequences. The point is to keep viewers tuned in, which means keeping them angry all the time. No reconciliation, no catharsis, no compromise. Political consultants have long been among the most devoted proselytizers of rage. If you can map an electorate's fears and then turn those into anger by moralizing your opponent's sins, they'll show up at the polls. Steve Jarding, a Democratic campaign guru who teaches at Harvard's Kennedy School, told me. He said, the essence of campaigns today is anger and fear. That's how you win. All of this anger-mongering in campaigns, whether subtle or overt, has had a corrosive effect on American democracy. A poll by the Washington Post found that 35% of voters in battleground districts of 2018 midterm elections chose the word angry to describe their feelings about the campaign. The thing about political professionals is that this is a quote, the thing about political professionals is that we get to leave after the campaign is over, the pollster Jeffrey Pollack told me. We don't have to worry about what comes after the election. The professionals aren't moral crusaders, they're hired guns. And after a long campaign, Pollack said, there's this huge group of passionate, energized people who don't know where to direct their anger. That's a perilous state of affairs. Without anyone to channel that anger, it can turn into destructive obsession. And that's when things really get out of control. So I said to David earlier the week, we need some angry music on Sunday. No problem, he said. Just a couple of brief announcements. Please take a look inside your order of service to get the whole enchilada. Reminder: the ERA petition, still awaiting your signature if you have not signed yet, for the Equal Rights Amendment, to kind of help our legislators understand life a little bit better. And then, of course, the swap, which is a huge deal. Please read about that. That's going to take place November 23rd. And quickly, I want to add that on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, we've got a UU orientation group, and that's Monica Dobbins and I will jointly facilitate an orientation to Unitarian Universalism. It's history, it's theology, some fun tidbits about this church and things you may want to think about. And also, it's not just talking at you, but we're going to be listening to some of your ideas and concerns and your ideas of what progressive religion really is all about. So it's great. So if you're kind of newish, be sure to join us on Tuesday at 7 o'clock right there in the social hall. And then we kind of have this stratified a bit because Monica is also doing a program called Beyond Inquiries. And so if you have time, and I hope you do, right following the service, about 12:30, quarter to 1, meet upstairs in the Haven. And so she's going to do the next level of, so we got the intro on Tuesday, and today, for those who've been around some and think you understand Unitarian Universalism, this is like the next level, and it'll be a fascinating time to get together and to learn more. And finally, I just want to mention that we've been engaged since September in a book group that focuses on African American novelists. It is not a closed book group. People come and go. It's very, very fluid. And we're going to do our third and last novel for this fall that we're going to resume again in the spring. And so please feel free to come. It's going to be on Monday, November 18th, again in the Elliott Hall. And our book is going to be Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates is perhaps acknowledged as the African-American intellectual in our country today. And this book is interesting because it's a novel. It's his first novel. He's written tremendous works. The Letter to His Son is probably the best known. He's fabulous. And it's interesting to see him now kind of translate all that's going on inside his soul and spirit into a novel form. And so if you have any interest, come join us. Water Dancer, Ta-Nehisi Coates. The offering will now gratefully be received, a chance to greet one another and bid each other a fine good morning. Is it me, or is it the times we live in? Maybe it's a combination. But you also may be wondering the same thing. Are you feeling more angry these days? Is it you, or is it just the times that we live in? I don't digest the news as easily as I once did. I mean, this week alone, when Dennis Muhlenberg, the CEO at Boeing, attended a congressional hearing and acknowledged that he was aware of concerns expressed by pilots, expert pilots, before the second fatal crash of a 737 MAX jet. He was aware. I got pretty angry. And 2 days after the second crash, Muhlenberg called Trump to vouch for the safety of these new airplanes. How does one take this calmly? Recently, when the New York Times featured an op-ed about researchers at ExxonMobil offering just a litany of scientific facts linking fossil fuels to devastating climate change in the 1970s, and then again more formally in 1982. The response at Exxon was pouring tens of millions of dollars into developing think tanks to confuse the public on climate change causes. I got pretty angry. Short-term financial gain in exchange for the loss of life, the loss of parts of the earth, devastating poverty, global hunger. And if that news doesn't fuel your anger, look at Exxon's current business plan to increase oil output by 25% in the next 5 years. How do you contain this rage? I mean, this is just lunacy. The impeachment process has made everyone mad, although for different reasons. A 28-year-old African-American woman was shot dead by a police officer outside her bedroom window. What do we do with this rage that we feel following that? And all those patriotic, liberty-loving, God-fearing politicians who support the president's dismantling of our democracy brick by brick by brick. I mean, that's just added kerosene to the flames of a rising anger. You know, it feels as though anger has become a staple of our everyday emotions. I turn my phone to the news first thing in the morning, and I get angry. That's no way to start the day. And so I try to compromise. Just read the headlines and avoid the story. That doesn't help. Avoid the news altogether? Then I'd be angry that I didn't know what was going on. Anger has come to dominate our warehouse of emotions. Anger is not pretty, but it can be waged so powerfully as to shape public opinion. A case in point was the confirmation hearings of the nominee to the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. His red-faced diatribes, every pore of his body spewing anger, helped seal his appointment to the court through intimidation. We got to see, watching this on the TV, we got to see what anger actually looks like. And once again, that old axiom seems to hold true: the squeaky wheel gets its way. But then I realized, haven't we really all kind of done that? At times, selectively, we unchain our anger to get our way or to settle a score. The loudest voice in the room wins the confrontation. I think you know what I mean. Many of us have played that game. But anger, fundamentally, is a pretty tricky emotion. It measures our temperament. You get cut off on the highway when there's nobody behind you. Close call, so unnecessary. How does your temperament handle that? How do you handle that when there's nobody else in the car but you? So temperament is defined by how we experience emotions. How do we? We may want to ask ourselves, how do I really deal with anxious situations? How do I deal when something makes me really uncomfortable, or I experience something that's so blatantly unfair? What happens? Am I at my best? Or do I come unglued? Possibly embarrassing myself. One of the kids mentioned he was embarrassed after he got so angry. We need to all ask ourselves, what happens afterwards? Are we embarrassed because all these people saw this rage just kind of oozing out? Now, by all accounts, we don't get to choose our temperament. We're all kind of stuck with it. It's kind of who we are. But, and this is the big lesson for us to learn. We need to take responsibility for our anger. Do we? Well, if we're honest, that can be pretty hard. Have you ever done something out of anger that caused pain to others? And I don't mean just to some, remote stranger, but pain to your spouse, to your child, or a friend of yours. The sheer volatility of your eruption can radically alter a relationship. True, anger can make a person feel pretty powerful. It can be used as a weapon. Anger wards off feeling vulnerable. Anger protects you from exposing a soft underbelly. You think no one's going to see or notice your weakness if you just get angry. Well, perhaps is it really about revenge and becoming angry? Do we really wish to get back at somebody? Now, if we truly want to take responsibility for our anger, and we should, it would be helpful to reflect for a moment on how we felt after our release of fury. What happened? Did you feel triumphant, confident, dominant after this explosion? Or did you feel ashamed, embarrassed, even guilty? This moment of power experienced in the midst of rage is usually short-lived. After an outburst, it's not uncommon to feel sadness. Gee, I'm not really the person I thought I was. It's not uncommon to feel lonely. In my anger, I seem to be pushing people away. And it's not uncommon to feel shame. Ooh, people around me are like they're walking on eggshells. Not good. Now, the social sciences have been trying to get their minds around anger for a very long time. It's all terribly complicated. It was once believed that anger was simply a base instinct, a vestige from our savage past that served no useful purpose in contemporary life. Society viewed anger as something mature people ought to suppress. Anger was viewed either as a problem to be solved or an instinct with little social benefit. But this didn't make much sense because everyone, including all the social scientists, even practicing Buddhists, experience bursts of indignation all the time. And so the thinking began to change. Maybe anger serves as a useful purpose. Because if anger were truly detrimental to us personally or to society as a whole, it would not have survived all these thousands of years of evolutionary change. Anger would have been weeded out through time by social codes of behavior. But anger has always been a part of us. Even Jesus couldn't always contain his rage to the shocking revelation of his disciples. In the age-old debate if Jesus was divine or human, well, let this incident, described in both the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, let this incident speak for itself. It describes, both Gospels, it describes Jesus walking this road from Bethany to Jerusalem, and he's tired, he's probably grouchy, and he's hungry. And on the road, he spots a fig tree up ahead with leaves. Well, the foliage of that fig tree signals that the tree should have plenty of delicious and mouth-watering figs to delight the palate. But as Jesus approaches the tree, he discovers the tree has no figs, just the leaves. The figs haven't come in yet. Jesus throws a fit. Jesus gets real angry, and he curses the tree and makes it wither from the roots, never to yield fruit again. It was kind of like a zap. Wow. Poor tree. Jesus, what inappropriate release of your anger, really. So what's he to do? What's he to do? You know, he was probably embarrassed by this. So he wants to walk it back, and he turns the incident, because he's thinking fast on his feet, he wants to turn this into a parable to somehow explain himself to his disciples who are absolutely, wow, what just happened? I can't believe it. And his rationale, and I quote from Scripture exactly, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it will be done. If you believe," he said, "if you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer." Did Jesus really mean to say that? If you have faith, everything comes to you? You can direct your anger and obliterate the target of your wrath? Jesus didn't believe that. He was making this stuff up. Faith is not establishing a quid pro quo. You know, it's like saying, I will have faith in you, God, though I need some power to vanquish my enemies. Interesting concept of prayer, interesting concept of anger. So let's take a few moments. Let's look at anger and note some of the changes in our attitude just over the past couple of decades. And by the way, there are about 25,000 studies on anger published every year. That's been the case for about the last 25 years. We're really trying to figure out this most confounding emotion. Is anger conceivably useful? Well, surprisingly, it can be. Anger can resolve tensions rather than exacerbate them. You know, there's a category known as ordinary anger, which is your typical run-of-the-mill daily confrontations with family. We heard the kids talk about this morning. So you got your run-ins with family, with colleagues, with friends, with neighbors. And this form of episodic anger can actually make a bad situation better. In the vast majority of cases that were researched, expressing anger resulted in all parties becoming more willing to listen, to speak honestly, and be more accommodating of each other's complaints. People reported that they tended to be much happier after yelling at an offending party. They felt relieved, more optimistic about the future, more energized. Even the targets of those outbursts agreed that the shouting and recrimination had helped. They served as signals for the wrongdoers to listen more carefully and to change their ways. When you think about it for a second, anger conveys more information more quickly than any other type of emotion. It forces people to listen, to actually deal with the problems. Now, my personal experience bears this out. I remember reading my son the riot act about curfews when he was a young teenager. He got angry. Oh, he got angry. And he said, talk to the hand. I mean, kids got to try this once, right? At least in our household, it happened just once. But it went a long way in resolving the issue. I listened. I had no choice. I listened. I finally listened to the unfairness of my edict. And we worked out a brilliant compromise. But still, I can't wait for his daughter to become a teenager real fast. What is essential to recognize is that anger can be an effective catharsis. It can lead to resolving differences. However, this is where it gets tricky. There's a line that needs to be drawn. It's this line. And that's what makes anger such a difficult subject to comprehend. A line exists between the desire to be heard and crossing over that line to hurt those whom we believe have wronged us. Now, what we seem to have learned about anger is that it does have a capacity to improve lives, but, that's that line, it can also do great harm. Identifying that line remains the huge hurdle in somehow getting a beat on anger, what anger is, our own anger. This emotion called anger, well, I guess it can work in one of two ways. It can transform differences and become a force that really helps society remain knitted together, or it could just rend that fabric and tear us apart. Now this became, the two choices, the options that we have really became quite clear when we compare Michelle Obama's admonition, I think we all know this, in 2016 when she said, when they go low, we go high. Right? Compare that 2 years later, 2018, Eric Holder's revision of that. He said, when they go low, we kick them. That's what this new Democratic Party is about. Really? It can kind of make you wince and question the idea behind anger as a force that could conceivably be more constructive. So what immediately comes to mind for me are social movements. Movements led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., by Gandhi, by Cesar Chavez. These movements all led to positive change. They expressed anger, righteous anger, aimed at an unjust society. They brought the disenfranchised in under the umbrella of anger, but aimed to make changes that were just. Harnessing this anger moved society forward towards attaining egalitarian goals. Now, people on the right also feel righteous anger about society's ills. But the difference, I think, is how that anger is directed. Conservatives frequently express anger by targeting other groups of people as scapegoats for all that is wrong. But frankly, both the left and the right can fall into that trap. Anger can cause us to lose sight of that line that when it is crossed comes at great peril. There's always that line. A case in point, Cesar Chavez used righteous anger as a tool to organize exploited farm workers. He offered a vision whereby migrant workers could right the injustices that smacked them in the face every day. Yeah, they identified the anger. Said, yeah, this is where it's at. And under this wave of anger, righteous anger, the farm workers supported Cesar Chavez to an extent that seemed almost unimaginable to corporate leaders. Still, widespread change happened because of this unified anger that he was able to manage. This unified anger was still under Cesar Chavez's control. Anger created cohesion within the movement. Okay? They were all angry. They were united by this, but there was still a sense of control. But after realizing many, many gains, some of the farm workers, independently, were dissatisfied with the pace of moving towards greater equality. And so they began to sabotage some produce trucks. They burned down buildings, and they physically beat up scabs who crossed the picket line. So essentially, Cesar Chavez was losing control. This anger took on a destructive force of its own. Chavez said, and this is so crucial for us to understand, he said, the movement had departed from its principles. That's what happened. The movement had departed from its principles. Principles must keep anger in check to avoid destructive impulses. So these principles apply to social movements and to our own outbursts of anger as well. Again, the issue is taking responsibility for our anger, meaning that it can and must be channeled towards positive outcomes. Yeah, you can be angry at your spouse without destroying the spouse or really harming the relationship. It's possible if you are conscious of the line that you simply cannot cross, and that you're a principled person. Now, in a larger social movement, Cesar Chavez began to fast so that the movement would become aware of its own destruction and begin to regain its principles of nonviolence once again. He consumed only water as the weeks passed, and there was some serious speculation that he would die. As he fasted, however, the angry violence began to subside, and after 25 days, Cesar Chavez was joined by Robert F. Kennedy at a Catholic Mass attended by thousands. So Chavez had literally starved himself to stop the anger from being misdirected towards destruction and senseless violence. Anger can rage out of control if we fail to heed the boundary between resolution and exacerbated tension. And I'm afraid that this is where we find ourselves today. There's unleashed anger without a trace of any kind of principle that can possibly knit our fractured, torn community back together. Now, we all have been angry at political situations, probably throughout our lives. That's always been the case. But the anger we feel today does not come close to resolving different points of view. And so I think what has happened is that a deep exhaustion has set in due to living with this persistent anger. I think we'd all agree it never lets up. Anger is the constant drumbeat of our lives. Anger has escaped the bonds of principle. And now, anger just runs amok. The line, that it's so important line, that line has been crossed by both the left and the right. And essentially, it's the same line that we know personally when we unleash our own anger and lose control. Now, on a national scale, that's magnified, 1,000,000 times over. So where are we right now? I think that as a nation, we are looking for leadership that can restore principles. Those basic principles that recognize and honor this line that is not to be crossed. Righteous anger can fuel positive change, but we cannot afford to lose sight of resolving the conflict, which may mean some compromise. We are a nation currently lacking principles that contain the anger. Our relationships with each other have been severely damaged as a consequence. And so, we realize anger can be used to bludgeon one another. Anger can also bring us closer together where we finally listen to one another, if listening somehow remains a priority. So we're now at this point where we've got a lot of work to do. Personally, got to remember that line, and as a nation as well. Anger is a very difficult emotion to corral. And so may we study it and learn to identify the limitations of anger and somehow proceed from there individually and as a nation. So be it. Can we conclude our service? Turning our hymn books, please, to number 124. As we extinguish the chalice, may we be mindful that we live in a world that needs a lot more love and much more respect. Every one of us wishes to be taken seriously, and we need to make that happen.
May we become contributors to a world which needs greater compassion, justice, and beauty. Amen.